The night settled over the ancient Wolf Arena market like a trembling breath, heavy with smoke and the bitter sting of burning pitch. Ash drifted through the air in slow spirals, turning the torchlight into a restless storm of red and gold. Every creature, wolf, human, or the one stuck somewhere in between, felt the pull of danger humming through the stone corridors. The kind of danger that tightened the chest and made even the strongest hands shake. The kind that whispered that someone, somewhere, would not survive the next few minutes. Crowds filled the towering colonnades, their shadows merging into a single, throbbing mass of anticipation. The marketplace floor was a mosaic of broken tiles and smeared blood, a place where condemned omegas and exiles were dragged out in chains to be judged like meat in the sun. Up above, carved wolves snarled from the marble arches, their empty eyes glowing faintly as though the stone itself watched the fear below. Tonight, the arena did not simply echo with sound. It pulsed with hunger. And through that storm of voices, through the chanting, through the drums, through the metallic crash of spears on shields, Aurelia ran. Barefoot, bleeding, half-shifted, moving on instinct more than strength. Her breath tore from her lungs in short, shaking bursts, the sound swallowed by the roar of thousands. Her arms and legs burned, but she didn't dare slow down. Not now. Not when she could still hear the guards behind her, their boots pounding the ground, their shouts slicing through the corridors like blades. Silver netting clattered as one guard cast it toward her, and she dodged just in time, the weighted edges scraping her thigh. She sucked in a sharp breath. She could smell iron. She could smell her own fear. And underneath it, far worse, she could smell the spark of power rising beneath her skin. Unwanted. Uncontrolled. Dangerous. The symbols carved into the marble pillars flared as she passed them, glowing so suddenly the guard stumbled back in shock. Lines of ancient prophecy shimmered in bright silver, reacting to her presence as though recognizing something she had spent her whole life denying. Aurelia didn't see it. She didn't want to. She pressed her wounded arm against her ribs, trying to stop the bleeding, trying to hold herself together. Her wolf whispered inside her mind, a low, urgent growl that vibrated through her bones. Warnings, instincts, fragments of old memories she didn't understand. The beast wanted to break free. It wanted to protect her. It wanted to burn everything in its path. But she couldn't let that happen. Not here. Not in this place. One misstep. One surge of power. And the Empire would slaughter her before she could blink. She slipped into a narrow passageway behind a toppled statue of a forgotten emperor. The stone face was cracked down the middle, jagged, broken, much like she felt inside. She crouched behind it, pressing her back to the cold marble, her breath shaking so badly she feared it might echo. The drums changed rhythm. Slow. Heavy. Each beat felt like a countdown. Her stomach twisted. The auction of the condemned was beginning. Aurelia knew that rhythm too well. She had heard it from behind iron bars. She had heard it in nightmares she could never outrun. And now, even as her heart thrashed in her chest, that sound pulled her out of hiding like an invisible hand. She didn't want to move toward it. She didn't want to see what awaited her there. But her body shifted into motion before her mind could catch up. Maybe it was exhaustion. Maybe it was destiny. Maybe, deep down, she knew she couldn't run from this part of her story any longer. Her legs trembled as she stepped into the open colonnade again. Torches spit sparks into the air, ash falling like snow over her tangled hair. She felt something inside her spine crackle, a faint pulse of silver flame that she immediately swallowed down with a desperate shake of her head. Not now. Not here. Not when one wrong flicker could expose the truth she had spent years hiding. She moved through the smoky haze, her vision blurring for a moment as the world warped around her. The pain in her arms spread through her chest. Her wolf howled quietly inside her, the sound heartbroken and furious at the same time. Not yet, she whispered, barely a breath, her voice trembling with fear and something deeper, something like grief. Please, not yet. The torches brightened as though reacting to her words. The crowd's voices grew louder. The drums slammed through the air with bone-shaking force. And she stumbled into the square. The center of the arena was a nightmare brought to life. Chains clinked with every movement as condemned wolves, omegas with sunken eyes, exiles with missing limbs, thieves, deserters, creatures caught with forbidden magic, were shoved forward by armored guards. The crowd leaned in eagerly, hungry for spectacle, for suffering, for something to point at and call justice. Aurelia's breath hitched. She felt it all crashing into her at once, the noise, the smell of blood, the hopelessness. It reminded her of the day she herself had been marched across this very ground, forced to her knees, her identity stripped from her with a single brutal decree. She had been young. Helpless. Powerless. But tonight, even injured and shaking, something inside her refused to break the way it had back then. A guard's torch swung toward her, catching her silhouette. Shouts erupted. Her heart slammed hard enough to blur her vision. Her wolf whispered again, louder, stronger, begging her to run, to fight, to burn the chains off every soul in this place. She clenched her teeth, swallowed the fire rising in her veins. She didn't want to be hunted. She didn't want to be feared. But she also didn't want to be powerless again. The ground trembled beneath her bare feet as more prisoners were dragged into the circle. The drums pounded like a heartbeat too big for the earth to hold. She pressed her hand to her wound, trying to steady the spinning world around her. Her eyes lifted toward the shadowed archways overhead. "I don't know who still listens," she murmured into the noise, her voice barely more than a breath, but heavy with desperation. "I don't know who still cares. But if anyone at all, can hear me, stay with me." Her voice cracked, but she kept speaking, her words spilling from somewhere raw and honest inside her. "If you believe in stories worth fighting for, in people who survive what should have destroyed them, in wolves who rise even after they're cast out, then don't turn away." She swallowed hard. The guards were closing in. The crowd was chanting again. "And, subscribe to Sophie's romance collections," she whispered like a plea carried on the last bit of hope she still had. "This story, my story, is only just beginning." And then the drums stopped. The torches dimmed. The crowd fell into an eerie, expectant silence. Because someone, was stepping into the arena behind her. Something powerful enough to freeze the world mid-breath. Something that made every instinct she possessed flare to life. Aurelia didn't turn. She couldn't. Her entire body had locked up. And above her, the ancient symbols on the pillars shifted into a different color, not silver now, but deep, molten gold, as though the arena itself understood the magnitude of what had just arrived. The silence stretched across the arena so thick it felt alive. Every breath, every heartbeat, every trembling thought held itself still as the shadow moved forward. The torches flickered in response, shrinking as though bowing to something older and more powerful than fire itself. Smoke curled away from the figure stepping out of the darkness, revealing the shape of a man built from the kind of strength that never needed to be spoken about. Alpha Cashin emerged into the half-light. Tall, carved from a kind of cold grace, wearing armor forged from obsidian wolf bone. The plates shimmered with a black, oil-slick sheen that absorbed the torchlight rather than reflecting it. His cloak, fastened at his shoulder with a talon-shaped clasp, billowed behind him like a gathering storm. Every step he took echoed with a deliberate stillness, the kind reserved for predators confident enough to never rush their approach. The crowd felt him before they fully saw him. Wolves bowed without command. Some knelt. Others lowered their gazes so sharply it looked painful. Even the guards stiffened, their hands tightening nervously around the handles of their spears. A hush settled deeper over the square as his scent, cold rain, steel, something ancient, rolled through the arena. Aurelia didn't turn. She didn't need to. The air itself shifted around her, bending toward him like her very breath recognized his presence before her eyes did. Her wolf, usually a chaotic snarl of fear and warning, went still. Not peaceful. Not trusting. Just, still, like a creature caught between instinct and shock. Cassian stopped several paces behind her. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then, with the kind of quiet authority that didn't need to be loud to be dangerous, his voice cut through the arena. "Stand down." He didn't shout it. He didn't growl it. The words were spoken calmly, almost softly. But they hit the guards with the force of a command etched into their bones. The men halted instantly. Spears froze mid-air. Silver nets dropped to the ground. One guard swallowed so hard the sound echoed. The torches flickered again. The carved wolves above seemed to glare down in warning. Aurelia's legs wavered beneath her. Her vision blurred for a moment. The cold sweat rolling down her spine made her shiver. Every instinct screamed at her to run, yet her body refused to obey. Cassian stepped closer. The sound of his boots against stone sent a strange shiver through her, fear tangled with something warmer, something unwelcome. He passed through the settling ash like it parted for him, his presence commanding the very air around him to shift. When he reached her side, she finally lifted her gaze. And then she froze. Because the moment she met his eyes, dark, steady, deep with something she didn't understand, the world narrowed to a single breath. He wasn't looking at her like she was a prisoner. Or a threat. Or a stray creature who had survived longer than she should have. He looked at her as though he recognized her. Not vaguely. Not distantly. Deeply. "Aurelia," he said quietly. Her name on his tongue felt like a secret spoken out loud. A sound she couldn't decide whether to flinch from or lean into. She hadn't heard her real name spoken with that much certainty in years. Her throat tightened. "You." Her voice cracked before she could finish the thought. "How do you know?" Before the question could form, her knees buckled. The world tilted sharply. Her breath turned jagged. Pain flared across her injured arm, ripping through her like lightning. She started to fall. But he was there, one hand gripping her waist, the other bracing her arm gently yet firmly. His fingers were warm, almost burning compared to the cold air around them. And for a heartbeat, she felt something strange in the way he held her. Not dominance. Not possession. A tremor. His hand shook. Not visibly, not enough for the crowd to notice, but her sharp senses caught it. He was fighting something inside himself. A pull. A recognition. A battle she could feel humming through his touch. He steadied her carefully, as though forcing himself to move with restraint he wasn't used to needing. "You should not be running in your condition," he said, voice low, the edges taut with something unspoken. Aurelia pushed weakly against him, breath shaking. "I'd rather run than let them chain me." His jaw tightened. Shadows crossed his expression. "Running only makes predators hungrier," he said quietly. She met his gaze with a spark she wasn't sure she had left. "Good. Let them choke on the chase." For a moment, something like amusement flickered across his eyes, but not playful. Sharp. Intrigued. A feeling he didn't want to acknowledge but couldn't deny. He shifted his grip, lifting her upright with surprising gentleness. She tensed as some of the guards stepped forward, uncertain whether to obey his earlier command or act on their orders. Cassian didn't bother looking at them. "She walks with me," he said. No one moved. No one dared to. He wrapped his cloak around Aurelia's shoulders, shielding her from the cold and the stares. At first she resisted, but the warmth. His warmth sank into her bones so deeply her breath stilled. The crowd murmured in confusion. Suspicion. Fear. Eyes followed them like arrows drawn but not yet released. Aurelia felt the weight of every stare. The doubt. The judgment. The silent question. Why her? Why the exile? Why the girl marked with danger? Cassian didn't slow his steps. He didn't justify his choices. He simply guided her away from the square, one steady hand at her back, his presence forming a quiet wall between her and the world that wanted to break her. Aurelia's heart pounded as they moved through the columns, the torches dimming behind them. His scent wrapped around her, unsettling something deep within her chest. She looked up at him, voice low, raw. "Why are you helping me?" He didn't answer right away. The silence stretched between them, thick with tension neither of them understood. Then, without looking at her, he spoke in a tone that revealed far more than he intended. "Because letting them take you," he said, "would be a greater threat than letting you run." Her breath caught. A threat to whom? He finally turned his head, his eyes locking with hers in a way that rooted her to the ground. "To me." And the torches behind them flared bright. As though the world itself reacted to the truth in his voice. The rain of ash drifted softer now, as if the marketplace itself was catching its breath after the Alpha's intervention. Aurelia walked beside Cashin with steps that barely held her weight. Each one felt like it pulled memories out of the ground, out of the walls, out of the cracks in the stone, memories she wished had stayed buried. The torches behind them crackled with an uneven rhythm, as if whispering stories she had tried so hard to forget. Cashin didn't touch her again after steadying her in the square. He walked a half-pace ahead, not to lead her by force, but to shield her from the eyes that followed them. The wolves in the marketplace parted for him the way waves retreat from jagged cliffs. And yet Aurelia felt every gaze on her. Sharp, measuring, waiting for her to slip back into the shape they expected from an exile. She kept her chin lifted anyway, even though her lungs felt bruised from running, even though her arm throbbed where the silver had grazed her. She kept walking because stopping meant drowning. Cashin slowed once they reached the quieter edge of the arena district, where crumbling columns framed empty stalls once meant for honored warriors. Now, they were little more than monuments to a world that had forgotten kindness. He turned just enough to glance at her. She didn't miss the way his eyes softened for a heartbeat, barely noticeable unless someone was looking for it. And she was. Against her will, she was. "It shouldn't have been you," he murmured, almost to himself. "Not here. Not in chains." The words hit her harder than the memory of the silver nets. They shook loose a place inside her she had sealed shut long ago. She told herself she wouldn't respond. She told herself silence was safer. But silence had teeth, and tonight it bit deep. "What difference does it make?" she whispered. "You saw the brand on my wrist. You know what they call me." Cashin's jaw clenched, tension flaring across the sharp line of his cheek as if he wanted to break whatever had marked her. "Names mean nothing. Not the ones they give. Only the ones we earn." She almost laughed, bitter, hollow, but the sound never made it out. Because beyond his voice, beyond his unervingly steady presence, the memories surged again. And this time, they refused to be quiet. Aurelia's breath faltered. The marketplace around her blurred, edges dissolving into the cold glow of a past she had clawed herself away from. And she saw it. The sacred circle. The council. The Alpha who had once promised her the world and left her with ashes instead. It started with the night of the bonding ceremony. When she was still foolish enough to believe she belonged somewhere. The moon had been high, full and white like a blessing. Lanterns had lined the old stone path leading toward the ceremonial clearing. Wolves had gathered in rings, their murmurs thick with anticipation. She remembered smoothing her shaking hands over her dress, trying to calm the wild surges of her heart. She remembered the way her wolf had paced inside her, restless, hopeful. And she remembered him. Darius. The Alpha who should have been her mate. He had looked at her like she was the answer to a prophecy. For a moment, one fragile, blinding moment, she thought the world was finally tilting in her favor. But the world loved to pretend kindness just long enough to hurt more when it vanished. When the ritual began, the council moved closer. Elders flanked the circle with the weight of tradition wrapped around them like armor. The runes carved into the stones glowed soft gold. She felt the bond pulling tight in her chest, shimmering like something alive. And then the pain struck. Not from him. Not from rejection. but from her own body betraying her. Silver flame erupted under her skin, bright, violent, untamed. A collective gasp rippled through the clearing. Her wolf tried to recoil, tried to hide the flare, but it was too late. The council stumbled back. The air split with alarmed shouts. And Darius, the male who had promised to protect her, took a full step away as if she had become a monster in the space of a heartbeat. Cursed, someone whispered. Unworthy. Dangerous. A threat. That was the night the future she'd imagined died before it ever lived. The night the council branded her wrists. The night Darius lowered his head and spoke the rejection that carved itself into her bones. By dawn, they dragged her from the territory. By dusk, she was nothing but a forgotten stray. The memory's grip loosened just enough for her to feel the present again. The chill of the marble arches. The soft echo of distant drums. Cassion's steady breathing near her shoulder. He watched her with an understanding that felt far too precise, as though he could see the scars she'd never shown anyone. His stare wasn't pitying. It wasn't horrified. It was searching, deep, deliberate, heavy with something she didn't want to name. But she couldn't hide what was happening inside her. Her wolf trembled with raw exhaustion. Her heart felt too exposed, too unguarded. And her voice broke before she could stop it. They said I was a danger to the pack. They said what lived inside me was wrong. Her throat tightened. They threw me into the Omega auction like I was already dead. Cassion inhaled slowly, the sound low and controlled, but his aura shifted, darker, sharper, threaded with fury he wasn't trying to hide. They fear what they don't understand. She looked away. You don't know what I am. I know enough. His voice dropped, rough with truth. I know you were not meant to die in that arena. Her pulse stumbled. Something warm and frightening surged through her ribs. But it was easier to retreat behind old walls than acknowledge the way her wolf pushed toward him. You don't owe me anything, she whispered. You could have walked away. I don't walk away, he said. Not from fate. The word lingered like a spark against dry earth, threatening to catch fire. Aurelia felt her knees weaken. The ground tilted. The ash in the air tasted like the night she lost everything. Cassion reached out instinctively, but stopped himself just before his hand touched her arm. His restraint was almost more jarring than contact. She could see the tension threaded through every line of him, like he was holding back a storm that wanted out. Come, he said quietly. There's shelter ahead. But she didn't move. Because another memory dragged her down, heavy, relentless. After her exile, the world had not softened. Packs that once pretended civility turned away from her. Some spat near her feet. Others kept their weapons where she could see them. She wandered until hunger gnawed through her like rust. And just when she thought she couldn't fall any lower, she was captured. Dragged into the system. Marked as an Omega criminal. Paraded like livestock. Traded for survival by those who claimed superiority. She remembered the first auction block she'd stood on. The cold chain around her throat. The jeering faces in the crowd. The way her wolf curled into a small, trembling knot inside her. She remembered promising herself she would never break like that again. But here, now, in this half-burned marketplace with its ancient shadows and its watchful eyes, she felt those pieces shifting again. And Cassion, silent, strong, infuriatingly steady, felt like the only thing keeping her upright. He turned toward her fully. The torchlight cast storm-dark shadows across his armor, illuminating the obsidian wolf bone etched with runic scars. His cloak stirred like thunderclouds caught on a restless wind. His eyes, those impossible, charged eyes, held her as if he had known her from across lifetimes. His stare didn't ask for submission. It didn't demand obedience. It simply waited, for her. And something inside Aurelia cracked open. Not a wound. Not a weakness. Something older. Something that had been waiting for its chance to breathe. Her skin prickled. The silver pulse beneath it flared faintly, dangerous, forbidden, beautiful. She clenched her fists to stifle it, but Cashin saw. He always seemed to see. Aurelia, he murmured, voice like distant thunder softening against dawn. What you carry isn't a curse. You don't know that. His voice lowered. I know power when I see it. She swallowed hard, fighting the heat rising in her chest. Fighting the memory of the council's horrified stares. Fighting the echo of Darius's rejection. I can't go back there, she whispered. To the person I was. To the girl they broke. Cashin stepped closer, not enough to overwhelm her, but enough that she felt his presence like a shield bracing her against the wind. Good, he said softly. Because that girl is gone. Her heart kicked hard against her ribs. What does that make me now? She asked. His answer was immediate, steady, and terrifyingly certain. Someone the world isn't ready for. The weight of the words wrapped around her like a mantle she never agreed to wear but couldn't deny belonged to her. The ash around them shifted with the slow, deliberate swirl of fate rearranging itself. Aurelia exhaled shakily. She didn't trust him. She didn't trust destiny. She barely trusted herself. But she followed him when he moved again. Not because she owed him. Not because she believed in the future he hinted at. And not because she thought she deserved rescue. She followed him because her wolf, wounded, frightened, but still alive, leaned toward him with a strange, quiet ache. He slowed his pace to match hers. Around them, the old Roman-style structures seemed to listen. Pillars carved with forgotten symbols glowed faintly as she passed, subtle, barely visible against the torchlight, but unmistakably reacting to her presence. Cashin noticed. His expression darkened, curiosity sharpening into something more urgent. They react to bloodlines, he said, voice dropping low. Only ancient ones. Aurelia tensed. It's a trick of the light. No, he replied softly. It's your truth trying to surface. But she didn't want that truth. Not yet. Maybe not ever. They approached a weathered stone archway leading to a quieter district. The ash rain had thinned. The air held the scent of damp earth and old incense. Aurelia's limbs trembled from exhaustion, but she didn't stop. Her wolf stirred again, cautious but awake. Cashin walked beside her in silence, but it wasn't empty silence. It was full of unspoken questions, unvoiced promises, and a tension that breathed like a living thing between them. She didn't know him. He didn't know her. But the air felt threaded with something ancient, something watching, something choosing. Aurelia tried to bury the thought before it could take root. Trust was dangerous. Hope was fatal. But the rhythm of his steps beside hers felt steady in a world that only knew how to shift beneath her feet. They turned down a narrower passageway lined with broken wolf statues, their missing eyes staring blindly at the path. Faded murals told stories of warriors, some revered, others erased. Aurelia's fingers brushed one of the damaged carvings. The stone warmed beneath her touch, as if recognizing her. Cashin noticed the glow before she did. His voice came out quiet, but edged with awe. Aurelia, what exactly were they so afraid of? She didn't answer. She couldn't. Her throat was too tight. Because she remembered now. Not perfectly. Not fully. But she remembered enough to know that her exile had never been about the flare of silver flame. It had been about lineage. Her mother's warnings. Her father's disappearances. The whispered story she wasn't meant to hear. Cashin watched her carefully, sensing the storm building inside her. You're shaking, he murmured. I'm fine. You're lying. She let out a fractured breath. I don't want to be seen right now. Too late, he said softly. I already do. The words slid under her skin like fire and comfort all at once. Aurelia looked away, but Cashin took a step closer, unable, or unwilling, to pretend he didn't feel the pull between them. What happened to you, he said, voice steady, should never have happened to anyone. It made me stronger, she whispered. It made you survive, he corrected gently. Strength is something else. She swallowed the tightness in her throat. And what do you think I am? He didn't hesitate. A beginning. Aurelia shivered, not from cold, but from the quiet certainty in his voice. From the terrifying possibility that he wasn't wrong. He lifted his gaze toward the shadows ahead, scanning the path like a guardian who had already decided she mattered. But Aurelia wasn't ready to matter to anyone. The weight of her past pressed against her ribs. The pain of rejection still lived beneath her skin, raw and unfinished. The terror of her own power whispered warnings she couldn't ignore. Cashin's presence made her feel seen, dangerously seen. And yet her wolf didn't retreat. It leaned toward him with an instinct older than betrayal. They walked deeper into the district, the ruins murmuring stories around them. And Aurelia understood something she didn't dare say aloud. This alpha, this stranger, was about to unravel everything she had worked so hard to bury. And fate, for the first time in her life, wasn't asking her permission. The air shifted the moment they stepped into the catacomb beneath the arena. Dust hung thick, coating the rough-hewn stones with centuries of silence. Torches flickered in sconces carved into the walls, but the shadows seemed heavier than any flame could pierce. The smell of ancient earth, cold stone, and something older, metallic and faintly sweet, clung to the air. Aurelia's bare feet brushed against the uneven floor, and each step echoed like a drumbeat, carried into chambers long abandoned by men but never by memory. Cashin moved ahead with deliberate precision, the obsidian wolf-bone armor clinking softly as he adjusted his cloak around her shoulders. He didn't speak at first, letting the catacomb speak in its own way, whispers of stone, shifting shadows, the faint hum of something alive beneath the earth. Aurelia's heart thudded in tandem with the resonance of the walls, the rhythm dragging her attention inward, to the pulse she had always tried to ignore. The walls were lined with frescoes, though the paint had faded, cracked, and peeled with time. Still, the images were vivid enough to grip her imagination. Wolves crowned in flames, their eyes bright with silver fire, stood over armies of men who trembled in defeat. Some wolves were massive, their forms larger than life, others smaller but no less fierce, each one a testament to a time when the line between mortal and immortal had blurred. Aurelia's breath hitched as her fingers traced one of the carved symbols on the wall, the stone warm under her touch as if it recognized the pulse of her bloodline. Cashin followed her gaze but did not reach for the symbols. Instead, he muttered softly, almost to himself, they knew. They always knew. His eyes darkened, shadows flaring across the angles of his face. Aurelia felt a tremor of unease. It was one thing to fear herself, to fear the fire that waited in her veins. But it was something else entirely to see that even this alpha, so composed and commanding, felt the weight of what she carried. The farther they walked, the fresher the carvings and statues became. Ancient figures of wolves, each crowned with flames licking upward, each frozen in poses of authority and protection, lined the passage. Among them, statues depicted a figure that stopped Aurelia cold. The lunar chosen, a wolf goddess said to be reborn once every millennium, her eyes wide with silver fire, her posture proud and unbroken despite centuries of mortal cruelty. Her presence, even in marble, radiated inevitability. The stories she had been told as a child, whispered around dying fires by old wolves with toothless smiles, now burned before her eyes with clarity that made her chest ache. Cashin's voice cut through her reverie, low and reverent. They called her the protector of the fallen. The one who would rise when the moon wept over fire and ruin. His hand hovered near the carved altar ahead, fingers brushing the air without touching. And, some believed she would come again. Aurelia's pulse quickened. Every step toward the altar felt like crossing a threshold not just of stone but of her own destiny. Her wolf stirred restlessly within her, growling softly, whispering warnings that were almost drowned by the pull she felt. She felt unworthy, small, broken, rejected, but also drawn. The energy in the room hummed around her, calling, demanding, awakening something she had tried for years to deny. When she reached the altar, runes etched into the stone ignited at her approach. They glowed with a soft, silver blue light that pulsed in rhythm with her own heartbeat. Aurelia staggered back, clutching her arm, her wolf flaring beneath her skin in response to the awakening energy. Her vision fractured, and suddenly, she wasn't standing in the catacomb at all. She was somewhere else. Somewhere impossible. A silver-eyed wolf towered over a ruined empire, its fur crackling with flame that didn't consume the earth beneath its paws. Cities lay broken, roads shattered, walls reduced to rubble. The wolf's gaze swept across the devastation, and Aurelia knew, somehow, she knew, that it was not a beast but a mirror of herself, of what she might become. A whisper brushed against her consciousness, soft but unyielding, "Child of the flame, the rejected shall rise." Her knees buckled, and she fell to the stone floor, pressing her face into the cold surface. She could feel the fire stir beneath her skin now, silver and alive, struggling against the cage of fear she had spent her life building. Her wolf howled, a sound caught between anguish and defiance, echoing through the catacomb as if answering the call of the prophecy itself. Cashin was at her side instantly, steadying her, his hand firm but gentle on her shoulder. His eyes reflected the glow of the runes, sharp and focused, but there was a tremor in his jaw she hadn't seen before. He whispered her name with a weight that made her shiver. "You bear the mark," he said. She jerked her head up, disbelief and fear flashing in her eyes. "No. No, it can't be me. I'm not worthy of that. I'm not." "Destiny doesn't care about worthiness," he interrupted softly, but firmly. "It never asks. It only chooses." Her hands shook as she touched the runes, feeling the pulse of magic flow into her, around her, binding her to a story far larger than the one she thought she had been cast into. She wanted to deny it, to retreat into the familiar shell of exile and rejection, but the energy was insistent. It hummed with urgency, with inevitability, with the promise of power she could no longer hide from. Images assaulted her mind. She saw herself as a child, running through forests under a full moon, silver light bathing her fur and skin. She saw elders recoiling in terror as her wolf flared. She saw the council casting their judgment, branding her as dangerous, cursed. And beneath it all, she saw flames that didn't consume, eyes that glowed with inevitability, and a pull toward a future that had been written long before she drew breath. Cashin's voice drew her back from the edge of the visions. "Breathe. You're not alone in this." She shook her head, hot tears sliding down her cheeks. "I don't know how to be what they think I am." "You don't have to," he said. "You only have to be who you are." The words should have felt simple, but they weighed heavier than any chain she had worn. Heavy enough to shake her to her core. Heavy enough that her wolf whimpered, uncertain, yet strangely hopeful. Aurelia's hands pressed to the cold altar as the runes pulsed in response, responding to the silver fire that had always lain dormant in her bloodline. Every heartbeat sent waves of warmth and pressure through her veins, awakening muscles, senses, and instincts she had buried under fear. The silver flame beneath her skin flared for an instant, then she forced it down, pressing her palms flat to the stone. "You're stronger than you know," Cashin said, his voice low and resonant, vibrating with authority. "Stronger than any pack, any council, any exile. You carry a legacy older than memory." Aurelia's mind reeled. "I don't. I can't. I've been running from it my whole life." "Running never made anyone safe," he said. "And hiding never made anyone free. The moment has come, Aurelia. Either you step into it, or it steps into you anyway." The words made her stomach drop. The silver flame inside her flickered like a candle in wind. She could feel the pulse of prophecy surging through the marble walls, the statues, the carvings. They seemed alive, reacting to her, bending toward her. A voice, ancient, melodic, filled with authority, sounded in the echoes of her mind, repeating the same phrase. "Child of the flame, the rejected shall rise." The enormity of it struck her full force. The rejected shall rise. She had been broken, humiliated, cast aside, auctioned like property to the highest bidder, hunted and feared. And now, the prophecy claimed her. Her wolf growled low in her chest, trembling between fear and anticipation. The fire pulsed, heat and light crawling beneath her skin, demanding release, demanding acknowledgement. She pressed her head to the altar, struggling to keep control. She wanted to run, to deny it, to hide again, but her instincts betrayed her. Every instinct whispered a single truth: she was chosen. She had been chosen before she even knew her own name. Cashin stepped closer, his presence both grounding and terrifying. His hand hovered near hers, not touching, but near enough that the magnetic pull between them made her skin tingle. "You're not alone in this," he said again, quieter this time. "I will not let them define you. Not now. Not ever." Her chest heaved as she lifted her gaze, finally meeting his eyes through the fire of her awakening power. There was recognition there, yes, but also awe, restraint, and a strange, undeniable pull, the kind that whispered of fates intertwined and storms shared. Aurelia whispered a vow to herself, to the fire, to the prophecy: she would rise. Not for the council, not for the pack, not for the world that had rejected her, but for herself. And as the runes glowed brighter, feeding off the pulse of her blood, the altar hummed like it was alive, like it had waited for this moment for centuries. Silver light traced along her arms, her shoulders, wrapping her in warmth that was both foreign and familiar. The catacomb walls vibrated, echoing with chants she couldn't understand but felt in her bones. Cashin's voice broke through the resonance, steady and unwavering. "Your fire is awakening, and the world will feel it. Are you ready?" Aurelia's breath caught. Her wolf stirred, quiet now, attentive. The silver flame flared beneath her skin, her pulse syncing with the runes, her heartbeat a drumbeat in the hollow stone. I don't know," she whispered. Cashin reached out then, placing a hand lightly on the small of her back, his touch firm but not overbearing. The warmth traveled into her, grounding her even as the energy around her pulled at her very soul. "You will learn," he said. "You have no choice. You are the child of the flame. And now, your story begins." The altar ignited with blinding silver fire. Frescoes on the walls came alive in her mind. Wolves of legend howled in chorus. Statues shimmered as if bowing. And Aurelia felt it, her power, her destiny, the weight of millennia in her bones, and the undeniable pull toward the future she had always feared but could no longer deny. Her eyes, silver and molten with energy, lifted toward Cashin. The storm outside the catacomb had nothing on the fire surging inside her. She was no longer the rejected child. No longer the hunted Omega. She was something new, something ancient and unstoppable. And in that moment, even Cashin's steady gaze betrayed a flicker of awe. "You bear the mark," he said again, softer this time, reverent. "And it cannot be ignored." Aurelia's lips parted, ready to deny it, but this time, her voice caught in wonder rather than fear. She felt ready. The prophecy was no longer a whisper. It was alive. It was her. And as the catacomb trembled subtly under the weight of her awakening, the first stirrings of destiny pulled them both toward the storm yet to come. The first roar of defiance was not hers. It belonged to the stones beneath the arena, to the echoes of centuries that had witnessed betrayal, blood, and power struggles too old to remember by name. Aurelia's boots, bare now, slick with ash and mud, pounded against the marble floor as she followed Cashin from the catacomb, the pulse of prophecy still thrumming beneath her skin. She thought, briefly, that they had escaped the darkness. She thought that perhaps the world could hold its breath long enough for her to breathe. But the arena does not forgive. They emerged into the wide expanse of the central plaza just as the imperial trial began. Torches had been lit in neat rows along the circular stands, burning low and casting flickering shadows over stone faces carved in centuries past. Spectators, a mixture of nobles, pack members, and commoners, leaned forward, eyes shining with anticipation and judgment. The air was electric, full of tension, the kind that makes your lungs tighten and your hands ache with anticipation even before a sword is drawn. A sudden, jarring shout tore through the plaza. Fugitive. Criminal. She bears the mark of treachery. The voice belonged to Lucian, a rival alpha whose reputation was carved from fear. He stormed into the arena accompanied by a dozen soldiers, their armor clinking, spears glinting under torchlight, eyes fixed on her as if she were a disease they could excise from the world. His presence alone caused a ripple of unrest in the crowd, murmurs turning into shouts, shouts into chants. Aurelia froze, her chest tightening as the drums of accusation beat faster than her heartbeat. Her wolf shifted within her, low and warning, sensing danger that her mind had not yet fully grasped. Silver fire flared faintly beneath her skin, responding to the fear, to the urgency, to the injustice. She clenched her fists, trying to suppress it, trying to convince herself she could be small, quiet, invisible, but the world was already demanding she be seen. Lucian's voice rose, sharp, commanding, soaked in authority and venom. She is a traitor. She was exiled for defying the council, and now she dares return under the guise of prophecy. This arena demands justice. The crowd erupted in agreement, a tidal wave of anger and fear sweeping the plaza. Spears jabbed the air. Wolves growled, fangs flashing in anticipation of blood. Even the high-ranking elders perched in their ceremonial seats leaned forward, their faces masks of judgment, eyes glinting with cruel delight. Aurelia's breath came shallow, ragged, but she did not run. She could not. Not this time. She had been hunted, paraded, and branded. She had been told she was dangerous, cursed, unworthy, and she had survived it all. And now, with every gaze accusing her, with every weapon aimed like an extension of hatred, she felt something settle inside her chest. Not fear. Not despair. Determination. Cassian stepped forward, moving between her and the advancing soldiers with a fluidity that seemed almost impossible. His armor glinted darkly under torchlight, obsidian wolfbone catching the reflections of fire, his cloak billowing like a storm cloud ready to break. He raised a hand, and the soldiers paused, uncertainty flickering in their eyes. "She is under my protection," Cassian declared, voice low and commanding, resonant with authority that made the crowd fall silent in disbelief. "Anyone who lays a hand on her does so at their own peril." Lucian's laugh was bitter and sharp, slicing through the uneasy calm. "You call her your charge? She is a criminal. An exile. Do you wish to court death, Cassian?" Cassian's gaze locked on Lucian's, unwavering. "I court nothing but truth. And the truth is hers to decide, not yours." The tension in the plaza snapped like a frayed rope. Soldiers lunged, spears angled, and the ceremonial trial erupted into chaos. Dust rose from the arena floor as claws and blades clashed, echoing with the sound of violence and fury. Aurelia's wolf growled, muscles tensing, ready to leap, ready to fight. But she was restrained, dragged back by the guards who sought to control her even as they faltered against Cassian's force. She cried out, struggling against their grip. Her tears mixed with the ash that coated her skin, streaks of silver fire catching in the torchlight. "I will not run," she screamed. "I will not be hunted anymore." Cassian's shouts rang out over the chaos. "Hold the line." He bellowed, deflecting a sword with the edge of his gauntlet, twisting and turning with precision and ferocity. He moved like a force of nature, a storm contained in human form, every strike and parry deliberate, every motion charged with purpose and fury. Aurelia's heart clenched as she watched him fight. She wanted to help, to unleash the fire she had fought to control, but her captors kept her bound within the arena's outer ring. She could see the rise of her own destiny mirrored in every swing of his blade, every movement, every second that he stood between her and annihilation. Lucian pressed forward with ruthless efficiency, his soldiers coordinated, disciplined, unyielding. Every moment felt like centuries had passed. Aurelia's wolf raged inside her, every instinct screaming to leap into the fray, to protect, to destroy. But she was bound. Helpless. And yet, for the first time in her life, she did not feel small. She did not feel unworthy. She felt alive. Cassion's eyes flickered toward her briefly, sharp, searching, a silent reassurance amidst the storm of steel and bloodlust. Their connection, brief and wordless, sent a jolt through her, a reminder that even in the heart of chaos, they were tethered to one another. The crowd's cries became a storming tide, demanding the ceremonial punishment, demanding her death or submission. The arena seemed to close in around her, walls narrowing, torches flickering wildly as if the very space were caught in the tension. She could see the faces in the crowd, some eager for spectacle, some twisted by fear, others lost in wonder, and she realized that for the first time, she had the power to make them feel fear in return. Her wolf stirred, silver fire igniting faintly beneath her skin, whispering warnings, whispering possibilities. She pressed her palm to her chest, feeling the energy thrumming, threatening to break free. She wanted to unleash it, wanted to strike, to burn, to take the arena by force, but she stopped herself, grounding her focus on Cassion, on the fight, on survival. Even as soldiers pulled her away from the main clash, dragging her to the outer ring where she could only watch, she made a silent vow. Tears blurred her vision, but her resolve sharpened like a blade against stone. She would no longer be the hunted. She would no longer hide. She would rise, not as a fugitive, not as an exile, but as someone who could not be denied. Cassion's movements became a whirlwind of defiance. He fought like a man possessed, every strike and block a declaration that Aurelia's fate would not be dictated by cowardice, fear, or ancient prejudice. His obsidian armor reflected torchlight as if he carried the night itself with him, and every clash of blade against claw, metal against wolf bone, sent tremors through the arena floor. She could hear the echo of prophecy in every motion, the rejected shall rise. And though the soldiers sought to subdue her, the crowd's energy shifted, pulled into the rhythm of destiny unfolding. The chance of punishment wavered, uncertainty flickering in eyes that had moments ago demanded blood. Her wolf howled inside her chest, low and resonant, and she felt it finally, the surge of power, the awakening flame she had suppressed for so long. Not yet unleashed fully, but present, waiting, responding to the storm around her. Her pulse synchronized with the rhythm of battle, each heartbeat a drumbeat of inevitability. Aurelia's captors faltered under the weight of her presence, as though the air itself refused to obey them. Dust rose around her like spectral soldiers, carrying fragments of ash and light that painted the arena with an otherworldly glow. She pressed herself against the stone wall, watching, feeling, waiting. Every ounce of fear she had carried for years boiled into determination, a fire hotter than silver flame. Cassion's voice rang out again, commanding and precise, "Leave her be. She answers to no one but herself." The soldiers hesitated, uncertainty cracking the lines of their formation. Lucian's fury erupted, a red storm ready to consume everything. Swords swung, bodies collided, and Aurelia saw the edge of history bending, shifting, and challenging the rules that had bound her so long. Through the chaos, Aurelia realized something she had never allowed herself to feel before: she was not weak. She was not alone. And even though the battle raged around her, even though she could not yet act, the fire in her blood whispered a promise she would honor. "I will rise. I will fight. I will no longer be the hunted." And with that, she felt her destiny stir, coiling, waiting, ready to claim her as its own. The night swallowed the ruins whole, a quiet vastness punctuated only by the gentle rustle of leaves and the soft lap of wind against broken stone. Moonlight poured across the crumbled archways, silver and cold, painting the moss and ivy with an ethereal glow that made the place feel suspended between time and memory. Aurelia sat against a fallen column, shivering despite the layers of ash and dirt clinging to her skin. Her arm throbbed where guards' hands had dragged her, bruises blossoming like dark flowers across her flesh. She tried to breathe, to quiet the storm that still roared inside her from the arena, but her heart refused to settle. Cassion knelt before her, careful and deliberate, spreading a small bundle of herbs across a flat stone. The air smelled faintly of rosemary, sage, and something metallic, something that carried the scent of old blood and old victories. His hands moved with practiced precision, pressing the poultice into her bruised arm, binding it with strips of cloth that had survived centuries of decay. Aurelia flinched, but he was gentle, patient, his fingers brushing against hers in a way that sent heat through her despite the chill of the night. "You don't have to say anything," Cashin murmured, his voice low and rough, almost swallowed by the wind. But Aurelia's eyes met his, and something unspoken passed between them, a recognition, an understanding that went deeper than words. I don't know why you saved me," she admitted finally, voice brittle. "Why you would risk yourself for someone like me. A fugitive. An exile. A mistake." Cashin's eyes darkened, not with anger but with a kind of quiet storm that made her chest ache. "Because someone has to," he said simply, pressing the bandage into place. "Because I see you. And because I know what it means to be hunted, to be alone, to have the world decide you are worthless before you even understand yourself." Aurelia's throat tightened. She wanted to reject him, to retreat into the cold familiarity of fear and isolation, but the warmth of his gaze anchored her, and the fire from the moonlight seemed to echo the pulse of something ancient stirring in her veins. You don't know what it's like," she whispered, voice breaking. "To be thrown away, to be called cursed, to watch everyone you loved turn away." "I do," Cashin said quietly. "My father died protecting a prophecy child. Someone like you. Someone who could have changed the world, if the world had allowed them. I grew up with that story, with that weight. I know what it feels like to carry the future on your shoulders while everyone else counts you out." Her breath caught. The pain she had carried for years, the shame, the humiliation, the endless loneliness, felt suddenly mirrored in him, and yet not heavy, not oppressive, but shared, acknowledged. She let a shiver pass over her, leaning a little closer to the fire, letting its warmth seep into her bones. They sat in silence for a few moments, listening to the wind whisper through broken columns, the moonlight glinting off scattered shards of marble. Aurelia noticed the way Cashin's shoulders relaxed slightly when he thought she wasn't looking, the way his hands lingered near hers, hovering, almost brushing, yet careful not to cross the invisible line of respect and restraint. "Why me?" she asked again, softer this time. Her voice trembled with fear, desire, and the hope she had tried so long to smother. "Why not someone stronger, someone safer, someone worth your risk?" Cashin's gaze softened. "Because strength isn't always measured by the body," he said, voice low and intimate. "It's measured by who survives, who dares to rise when the world has already thrown them down. That is strength. That is you." Her wolf stirred inside her chest, a low, rumbling awareness of him, of the closeness, of the connection that had been building since the catacombs. The pulse of silver fire beneath her skin flickered in response, subtle and electric. She shifted slightly, their hands brushing for the briefest of moments, sparks igniting where skin met skin. She wanted to pull away, to hide, to remind herself of the dangers of trusting anyone, but the warmth of his hand, the certainty in his voice, the calm authority that had saved her in the arena, pulled her forward. The moonlight kissed the edges of his jaw, traced the lines of his shoulders, and she realized, with a jolt, how profoundly drawn she was to him. "You're afraid," he said, as if reading her thoughts. "Afraid to let anyone see all of you." Aurelia's throat tightened, and she looked down, ashamed yet unashamed. "I can't. I've been burned before. I don't know if I can trust anyone again." He reached out then, gently tilting her chin so her gaze met his. His eyes held hers, unwavering, intense, and impossibly soft all at once. "I see you. All of you," he whispered. "Not just the strength, not just the fire, not just the wolf. I see the fear, the doubt, the scars. I see every part of you, and I am not afraid. You don't have to hide from me, Aurelia. Not here. Not ever." Her chest heaved. The words were heavy with truth, carrying a weight she had spent her life avoiding. For the first time, she did not feel the sting of judgment, the threat of rejection. Instead, she felt a strange, dizzying blend of hope and fear, desire and restraint. Her wolf stirred restlessly, muscles tensing, urging her to leap, to surrender, to connect fully, yet whispering caution born from years of survival. The fire crackled between them, small sparks leaping into the night air like fragments of their unspoken tension. Their faces inched closer, the air charged, every inhale a temptation, every heartbeat a drumbeat toward an inevitable crossing. Aurelia's lips parted, hesitating, caught in the delicate line between yearning and fear. Cashin's breath brushed her cheek, warm and steady, anchoring her. "Trust me, or leave," he murmured, voice barely above the crackle of flames, yet it carried the weight of choice, of destiny, of all the battles yet to come. Her wolf whimpered softly in her chest, and she felt the pull of desire tangled with instinct and hesitation. She wanted to trust him completely, to let go, to let the fire of her heart burn as brightly as the silver flame beneath her skin. But the shadows of the past clung to her, whispering of betrayal and loss. Cashin's gaze did not waver. He let the silence stretch, patient, unwavering, a steady presence that spoke louder than any words could. "You don't have to answer now," he said. "I will wait. I will fight. I will protect. But I will not abandon you. Not while you still breathe." The sincerity in his tone wrapped around her chest like a hand, squeezing gently, grounding her. Her wolf stirred, still restless, but the fear that had ruled her for years receded slightly, leaving room for something dangerous, something intoxicating, trust. She leaned back against the stone, letting her head fall onto her knees for a moment, and allowed herself to breathe. The fire crackled softly, casting flickering shadows across broken columns and mossy walls. The wind outside whispered through the ruins, carrying with it scents of pine, smoke, and the faint metallic tang of silver that made her wolf stir again. Cashin settled beside her, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his body, the subtle tension in his muscles, the quiet rhythm of his breath syncing almost imperceptibly with hers. Neither spoke. Words were unnecessary. Every glance, every small movement, every faint brush of his fingers against hers spoke volumes. The night stretched on, slow and deliberate, filled with intimacy and confessions. Cashin revealed fragments of his past, how his father had died protecting a prophecy child, how that legacy shaped him into the alpha he was, how fear and loss had molded his decisions. Aurelia shared pieces of her own pain, the exile, the auctions, the rejection, the cruel branding of her soul as cursed. Each story deepened their connection, weaving invisible threads between them, fragile yet unbreakable, tension and comfort coexisting in every heartbeat. The moon rose higher, spilling silver light across the ruin, turning shadows into long, graceful shapes. The air between them pulsed with a slow-burning electricity, and Aurelia felt the stirrings of something she had never allowed herself to feel before, belonging. Not to a pack, not to a prophecy, not to the world. But to this moment, to this alpha who saw her without fear, without judgment, without reservation. Her wolf pressed against her chest, aware, attuned, sensing the closeness, the almost imperceptible brush of skin and breath, the tension that promised fire and pain in equal measure. She tilted her head, their eyes locking, and for a heartbeat, the world contracted, leaving only them, only this fragile, dangerous, beautiful connection that neither dared fully acknowledge yet. A spark jumped between their fingers as they brushed again, accidental, fleeting, but enough to send a jolt through her nerves, enough to make her wolf howl quietly in exhilaration and longing. The fire reflected in their eyes, mirrored in the silver glint beneath her skin, as if the night itself waited for her decision, for the moment when she might finally surrender to trust, to desire, to the inevitability of their bond. Cashin leaned closer, the faintest whisper against her temple. "I will see you. All of you. Every fear, every scar, every flame. And I will not turn away." Her breath caught. The vulnerability in his voice, the unwavering patience, the intensity of recognition, it undid her carefully constructed walls in a way that left her trembling, terrified, and yet impossibly, achingly alive. The fire crackled one last time, sending sparks into the night sky, each one a promise, a warning, a possibility. Aurelia's wolf shifted, curling tightly against her chest, whispering of desire and danger, of trust earned and risks taken. And as the moonlight poured across them, she realized that in this fragile, aching, delicate moment, she had a choice: to retreat into fear, or to step forward into fire. And she knew, deep in her bones, that stepping forward might finally awaken everything she was meant to become. The morning was false light, gilded with promise, but carrying the weight of doom. The arena, once a place of distant shadows and echoes, now brimmed with people whose eyes had turned to knives, whose whispers had become venom. Torches burned along the marble stands, their flames shaking as if aware of the tempest poised to descend. Aurelia's bare feet scuffed across cold stone, each step heavy with the memory of every rejection she had endured, every branded scar upon her soul. Her pulse thrummed with unease, a rhythm that told her instinctively that the world she had begun to trust was about to betray her once again. She had stood with Cassian at her side, had felt the fragile tether of connection, had let herself believe that survival, perhaps even freedom, could exist. But the Imperial Council had no sympathy for her story, no patience for nuance, no allowance for destiny. They craved spectacle. They craved control. And they would take it at any cost. The grand gates of the arena opened, revealing the council clad in ceremonial robes of crimson and gold, their faces stern masks carved from tradition and fear. The crowd shifted, leaning forward, expectant, hungry for judgment. Lucian, that shadowed wolf of ambition, stood at their side, a grin splitting his face like a blade. He had orchestrated this, every detail, every whisper, every rumor, bending the narrative until the world believed she was not only guilty but a threat that must be extinguished. The head of the council rose, a figure of authority whose voice carried like a whip across stone and bone. "Citizens of the Empire," he announced, tone slow, deliberate, filled with gravity. "Today we reveal the truth of the Flameborn. The rejected. The one whose destiny threatens us all." Aurelia's stomach twisted, a coil of ice and fire. Her wolf bristled within her, a low, warning growl that trembled against the fragile calm she had clung to. She could feel every pair of eyes slicing into her, every heartbeat a hammer of accusation. She wanted to scream, to run, to deny, but the words lodged in her throat, thick as iron. The council began to recite the manipulated prophecy, each syllable dripping with menace. "The Flameborn will burn the Empire. The one rejected shall rise not for mercy, but for ruin. Beware the child of silver fire, for she carries the mark of devastation, and her power shall consume all." Gasps and murmurs surged through the crowd like a living wave. Children clutched their mothers' robes, elders leaned forward, some with fear, some with anticipation, wolves in the stands bristled, ears twitching at the scent of danger. Aurelia's vision blurred, and a pulse of silver fire rippled beneath her skin, responding to the venomous words, reacting to the judgment, reacting to the betrayal that had been set into motion long before she could even rise. Cassian froze, his obsidian armor glinting in the torchlight, jaw tight, eyes storm-darkened. The moment hung between them like a cliff poised to fall. Duty, honor, prophecy, every code he had ever sworn seemed to weigh him down. He wanted to speak, to defy, to tear the council apart with words, with claws, with fire, but the expectations of his station, the unspoken chains of leadership, pressed upon him. "Step forward," the head of the council commanded. "The Flameborn shall be measured before the Empire. Shall we enact mercy, or justice?" Soldiers moved toward her, armor clanking, spears poised, their hands firm and unrelenting. Aurelia's heart sank. The platform for execution, cold and unforgiving, awaited her as it had awaited countless others who had dared defy the Empire. Her legs trembled as they lifted her, each step a betrayal, each movement a reminder that the world had not yet learned compassion. She looked at Cassian, seeking the tether, the anchor, the one proof that she was not completely abandoned. But he hesitated, rooted in place, a storm behind his eyes. Duty warred with desire, tradition with instinct, and Aurelia felt the familiar, crushing weight of isolation descend. She had been alone before. She had been cast aside before. And now, staring into the faces of the Empire, the judgment upon her, she felt the old ache of rejection twist deep into her bones. A single breath, and the platform seemed impossibly high, impossibly steep. The soldiers prepared the ceremonial chains, binding her arms and legs with cold iron, their touch brushing against the fire that had always lain dormant beneath her skin. Her wolf shifted restlessly, muscles coiling, claws twitching as if desperate to leap into a battle that she had yet to embrace fully. Lucian's voice cut through the tension, cruel and triumphant. "Do you understand, exile? Do you comprehend the destiny that waits for you? The world does not need heroes born in flames. It needs obedience, control, fear. You will burn, whether you wish it or not." Aurelia's chest heaved, but she did not lower her gaze. Her wolf's growl rose, low and powerful, vibrating through her bones, resonating with the pulse of silver fire that was beginning to flare beneath her skin. Her eyes glinted faintly in the torchlight, a shimmer of steel and moonlight. She felt the energy building, reacting to injustice, to fear, to betrayal. Her mind screamed in tandem with her wolf: survival, defiance, power. Cashin took a step forward, his hand inching toward her, and she saw the torment etched across his features. He wanted to intervene. He wanted to stop this, to shield her, to rip apart the empire itself if he could. Yet, honor, prophecy, expectation, he had no clear path through the maze the council had laid before them. He could only stand there, silent and storm-dark, a protector constrained, torn between rules and instinct, between duty and heart. The head of the council raised a ceremonial dagger, a blade forged to symbolize the end of all who were deemed cursed, unworthy, and dangerous. Aurelia's breath caught. Her wolf shivered beneath her skin, the first tremor of a power long suppressed beginning to surge outward. She could feel it, coil within her, whispering, demanding, promising retribution and transformation. Chains bit into her wrists and ankles, cold and unyielding, but her power began to react to the injustice. A faint silver glow emanated from beneath her skin, pulsing like a heartbeat, growing, stretching toward the surface. The council's whispers faltered, the soldiers glanced uneasily at one another, and the air in the arena thickened, charged with anticipation and fear. Cashin's eyes widened slightly, recognizing the shift even as he feared what it might bring. "Aurelia," he began, voice tight with restrained command, "hold, control." But control was no longer hers to keep. The betrayal, the judgment, the accusation, it ignited something primal. Silver fire erupted, pulsing outward from her veins, cascading over her skin in streams of pure, brilliant light. The chains burned where they touched her, smoldering as if unable to contain the energy within. Dust rose from the arena floor, thrown into chaotic swirls by the force of her awakening. Torches bent and sputtered as if bowing to the power surging through her. The crowd screamed, some in terror, some in awe, and the arena itself shuddered under the intensity. Stone cracked along its edges, marble pillars shivering, and the floor beneath her feet trembled as though the very empire feared what had been unleashed. Aurelia's wolf roared, a sound that echoed from the deepest part of her soul, unrestrained, unbound, asserting its existence in tandem with her human form. Soldiers fell back instinctively, shields trembling under the pulse of her power. Lucian staggered, eyes wide with disbelief, realizing that the exile he had thought powerless was no longer something he could manipulate, no longer something he could control. Cashin moved swiftly, his hand reaching toward her, anchoring her even as the energy threatened to consume everything around them. "Steady," he murmured, voice firm but trembling beneath the weight of awe and fear. "It's you. It's always been you. Not them. Not the council. Not anyone who doubted you. You are yours, Aurelia. Own it." And in that moment, as the silver fire flared in unstoppable brilliance, the empire, the council, the arena, the chains, all of it fell silent under the sheer magnitude of her awakening. Aurelia realized something profoundly terrifying and exhilarating. She was no longer the hunted. She was no longer the rejected. She was the storm, the flame, the force that destiny itself had whispered about in shadows and prophecies. The arena trembled under the brilliance of her silver eruption. Torches shattered, dust swirled like spectral armies, and the earth beneath the empire seemed to quiver in deference. Her wolf shifted fully beneath her, luminous eyes reflecting the fire, the betrayal, the power. She was the flame-born, the rejected who would rise. And she would not stop, not for them, not for fear, not for anyone who sought to bind her. Cashin's hand held hers, grounding her even as the world fractured around them. "They cannot touch you," he said, voice steady despite the awe in his tone. "Not now. Not ever. You are more than they ever imagined. And together, we will rise." Aurelia's silver fire pulsed, blinding and magnificent, and for the first time in her life, she believed it. She believed that betrayal could be met with power. That fear could be answered with defiance. That the hunted could become the apex, unbound and unstoppable. The empire would tremble. The council would fall silent. And the world would remember the name of the Flameborn. The under-arena temple lay in darkness, carved from stone older than empires, walls etched with runes that pulsed faintly as though breathing beneath the dust. Aurelia descended the steps, each footfall reverberating against the silence, the sound swallowed by the weight of centuries. The air was thick with incense and memories, heavy with the voices of those long gone, lunar queens who had walked these halls, whose whispers now waited for her. She could feel them. Spirits pressed against her senses, their presence a cold and warm fire all at once, urging, guiding, claiming. Her wolf stirred beneath her skin, coiled tight, sensing the power embedded in the walls, the magic that hummed through the floors and ceiling alike. She felt it rise within her, silver flames licking her nerves, a fire that had slept, that had been caged beneath chains of fear, judgment, and exile. Now it roared awake, and she trembled. Not with fear, but with recognition, with the clarity of the destiny she had tried to deny for years. "Step forward," a voice hissed through her mind, ancient and melodic, vibrating with authority. "Step forward, child of the flame. You are not sacrifice. You are sovereign." Her heart hammered in her chest. She had always been the hunted, the rejected, the broken. The world had bound her in chains, in names, in cruelty, but here, in this temple beneath the Empire's arena, none of that mattered. Here, she was more than a fugitive. She was power. She was legacy. She was the echo of 1,000 silver queens who had dared to rise before her. Her hands brushed against the altar at the center, a surface carved with swirling runes that pulsed in recognition of her bloodline. The silver flame flared through her veins, igniting her wolf fully for the first time. The form that had been hidden, constrained by fear and shame, surged outward. Fur shimmering with silver fire, claws elongating, eyes luminous with unearthly light. She breathed, and the air around her vibrated, responding to her presence, bending and twisting like water under a storm's touch. "Not your chains. Not your fear. Not your judgment," Aurelia whispered to the shadows, her voice carrying through the vaulted halls like steel on stone. "I am mine. I am not your sacrifice." The temple trembled in response, dust cascading from the ceiling, runes blazing brighter with each heartbeat. Spirits swirled around her, spectral queens in flowing robes of silver and blue, mouths moving in chants that resonated through her bones. She could feel their guidance, their pride, their strength flowing into her, stitching together every broken fragment of herself, binding past pain to present purpose. Then came the rupture. The floor above the temple cracked, stone splintering in an explosion of sound and light. The arena above shook violently, screams and cries echoing down as Shadowbeasts, conjured from dark magic, were released into the chaos. Their forms were grotesque, shapes shifting like smoke and claws, eyes burning with unnatural hunger, lungs filled with the scent of fear. Soldiers and spectators alike scattered, yet Aurelia did not falter. Cashin appeared beside her, armor scorched and torn, his eyes wide with awe and something else, something unspoken, reverent, fearful of the magnitude of her power. He raised his sword, moving in sync with her movements, protecting her flank even as he struggled to comprehend the force before him. "Aurelia," he shouted over the roar of collapsing stone, this is incredible." She did not answer with words. Words could not contain what flowed through her. She leapt, silver flame coiling around her like a storm, landing with a force that shook marble pillars and sent the shadow beasts reeling. Her claws tore through stone and magic alike, leaving trails of silver fire that burned at the corruption, disintegrating the twisted creatures with every swipe. The under-arena temple seemed alive, ancient stone reacting to her presence, statues moving, eyes glimmering with consciousness, runes igniting like constellations across the walls. Every step she took was reclamation, every breath a declaration. She was no longer the hunted. She was the reckoning. Above, the arena structure groaned as cracks widened, dust and stone raining down. The crowd, those few who dared remain, stared in disbelief. The High Imperator, orchestrator of cruelty, manipulator of prophecies, stepped forward, robes fluttering like shadows caught in wind. His eyes narrowed, recognizing too late the storm he had unleashed. You cannot control it, he spat, voice dripping with fury and disbelief. The Flameborn, the exile, she is mine to destroy. Aurelia lifted her head, silver eyes locking on his, and she felt the pulse of all the queens, of all the legacies behind her, swelling within her chest. She stepped forward, the floor beneath her cracking with power, the air vibrating with raw energy. Her silver fur burned brighter, sparks flying into the air, illuminating the fear in the Imperator's eyes. I am not yours, she said, voice booming through stone and air, echoing with authority that had been forged through exile, betrayal, and survival. I am not the hunted. I am not the rejected. I am the flame. I am the wolf. I am Aurelia. The Shadowbeasts lunged at her, dark smoke and claws converging, but she moved as if the world had slowed around her. Silver flame erupted from every sinew, tearing through their forms, scattering them into ash and wind. Cashin fought alongside her, sword flashing, his movements precise and protective, yet he could not match the brilliance of her unleashed power. He was awestruck, witnessing the embodiment of prophecy in flesh and fur, understanding at last that destiny had not been cruel, it had been waiting. The High Imperator's magic collided with her own in a torrent of light and darkness. Bolts of shadow screamed toward her, but silver fire wrapped her like armor, deflecting, consuming, unyielding. Stone cracked under the force, pillars fell, the ceiling quaked, yet she moved forward, each step an assertion of sovereignty. Aurelia's heart pounded, a rhythm echoing the primal pulse of her wolf. She roared, silver flame erupting from her throat, and the High Imperator stumbled, his own power overwhelmed by the centuries-old energy she now commanded. The air trembled, dust, fire, and magic swirled in a tempest that left the world silent, awestruck, and trembling. She could feel Cashin at her side, his presence grounding her even as the energy threatened to consume everything. His hand brushed hers, just a moment, and the connection reminded her that even in this storm, even in this chaos, she was not alone. His eyes reflected the fire, and for the first time she felt fully seen, fully acknowledged, fully unbound. Then she struck, the culmination of years of exile, rejection, pain, and hidden potential. The High Imperator's defenses shattered under the force of her silver flame, his shadow beasts disintegrating into nothingness. Stone walls cracked, statues awakened, runes blazed in triumphant fury. The temple itself seemed to exhale, releasing centuries of suppressed power, bowing to the rightful Flameborn who had finally claimed her place. Aurelia stood amidst the wreckage, her wolf fully manifested, silver flames dancing across fur and teeth, eyes glowing with the light of every queen who had come before her. Cashin's hand rested on her shoulder, steady, affirming, a silent promise of alliance and unbreakable trust. The arena above was a ruined echo of order, but beneath it, in the under-arena temple, Aurelia realized she had transcended fear, exile, and betrayal. She was power incarnate, destiny realized, flame unleashed, wolf awakened. The High Imperator lay broken, defeated not by blade alone, but by the force of her reclaimed soul and fire-born authority. And as the moonlight filtered through the cracks above, casting silver across the chaos, Aurelia felt it fully, the truth of her strength, the weight of her destiny, the clarity of her sovereignty. She was no longer a sacrifice. She was the reckoning. She was the Flameborn. The world would never forget her name. The air hung thick with silver embers and the acrid scent of shattered stone, a residue of Aurelia's eruption of power. Dust drifted like smoke in the torch's dying glow, settling over the ruined arena as if reluctant to leave the weight of the moment behind. She stood at the center, silver fire shimmering across her fur, radiating an aura that was both beautiful and terrifying, a light that spoke of destiny reclaimed and wrath barely contained. The Empire watched her in stunned silence. Some faces were wide-eyed, mouths agape with awe, others twisted in fear, jaws tight as if trying to chew down disbelief. The soldiers who had once chained her, the council who had betrayed her, even Lucian, the wolf whose ambition had known no bounds, they all faltered beneath the force of her presence. Aurelia had become more than human. She was myth made flesh, prophecy walking, fire incarnate. Cassian stepped closer, armor dulled by soot but eyes ablaze with something raw, urgent, impossible to misread. His hand reached for hers, a gesture of connection, of grounding, of claiming the bond that had formed through peril, shared fear, and the fragile glimmers of trust. For a heartbeat, everything seemed possible. For a heartbeat, she almost let him anchor her, almost let the world tilt back into something familiar, something safe. But Aurelia pulled away, softly, deliberately, a single motion charged with the weight of her awakening. Her eyes, luminous silver, locked on him, searching, questioning, trembling, yet unwavering. Her voice, quiet but fierce, cut through the echoing ruins, carrying a tremor that belied her control, a tremor that touched hearts even without sight. Would you have chosen me, or feared me too? The question lingered, a weight pressing on everything around them. It was not just for Cassian. It was for the Empire, for the wolves who had watched her grow, for the countless exiles and condemned who had been forced to kneel beneath injustice. It was a question that demanded reflection, a question that burned as brightly as the silver flames coiling across her fur. She took a slow breath, the air trembling in her chest as if the world itself held its own pulse in anticipation of her next words. Her gaze softened, yet there was still fire, still the uncontainable strength of what she had become. "Am I your savior, or a girl cursed with too much fire?" she whispered, letting the words drift like smoke through the ruins, leaving a fragile vulnerability intertwined with undeniable power. The flames that had danced across her fur slowly receded, dimming but leaving her aura still glowing faintly, a residual shimmer of sovereignty and power that marked her as untouchable, as untethered, as irrevocably destined. The ground beneath her shifted as if bowing to her will, stone trembling under the quiet roar of energy that refused to be fully contained. She began to move, each step measured, deliberate, echoing through the shadowed corridors of the arena ruins. The Empire, frozen between worship and terror, could not interrupt her. Even the High Imperator, broken and defeated, could not summon words to defy her presence. Aurelia walked with the grace of the hunted turned apex, the rejected transformed into legend. Each footfall resonated with intention, each movement a story in itself, of survival, of power, of destiny taken, never given. Cassian's gaze followed her, unwavering, torn between respect, awe, and longing. He wanted to call her back, to claim her trust, to anchor her in the human warmth that still lingered beneath the silver wolf and flame. But he stayed silent, knowing that this was her journey, her awakening, her reclamation of everything that had been stolen from her. His hand hovered near where hers had brushed his, a phantom tether that spoke of devotion and restraint, of loyalty tempered by the understanding that some fires must burn alone before they can truly illuminate the world. Around her, the shadows of the ruined arena seemed to shift, alive with the echoes of prophecy and the whispers of spirits long gone. They bent toward her presence, not in fear, but in reverence, recognizing the culmination of centuries of expectation, betrayal, hope, and destiny. The walls, once etched with judgments and decrees, now reflected only the silver light that radiated from her being, marking every stone, every crack, every rune with the undeniable proof that the Flameborn had risen. She paused at the entrance of the corridors, a faint wind carrying the scent of smoke, ash, and freedom. The shadows seemed to part for her, welcoming her passage even as the Empire remained rooted in awe and fear. Aurelia's chest heaved with quiet strength, every inhalation a reminder that she had survived every attempt to break her, that she had mastered what they had once called a curse. She had transformed rejection into power, fear into flame, and exile into sovereignty. Then, almost imperceptibly, her voice drifted again, this time not as a question, but as an invitation, a soft echo that reached across the ruins, across the empire, across every soul who had ever felt lost or powerless. If this story lit something inside you, subscribe to Sophie's Romance Collections. Here, we tell tales that burn. The words lingered in the air, a delicate yet undeniable promise, a bridge between Aurelia's world of silver flame and the hearts of those who listened. They were not just a call to action, they were an extension of her journey, a thread of connection woven from fire, destiny, and survival. Each syllable resonated with the intimacy of shared experience, as if she were speaking directly to the listener's own scars, fears, and hidden strength. As Aurelia vanished into the shadowed corridors, the dim glow of her residual flame illuminating the passage ahead, the Empire remained silent, caught between reverence, terror, and the undeniable reality that a new era had begun. Every spectator, every soldier, every council member was left to contemplate the power of the Flameborn, of a girl who had been rejected, betrayed, and cast aside, yet emerged not broken, but radiant, sovereign, unstoppable. Cashin remained at the edge of the ruins, hands clenched, eyes fixed on the corridor where she had disappeared, his heart pounding with a mixture of awe, longing, and devotion. He understood now that she was no longer the girl he could shield, no longer the exile to be protected. She was the storm, the silver flame, the embodiment of prophecy. And as he looked upon the fading light, he whispered to himself, almost reverently, "She is hers. And I follow." The ruins, the corridors, the whispering shadows, all seemed to hum with the echo of her presence, a soft, lingering promise that this story was far from over. The fire of her power, the weight of her destiny, the depth of her transformation remained etched into every corner, every stone, every ember drifting in the aftermath. And in that suspended moment, the listener is left breathless, heart hammering, caught between awe and anticipation, waiting for the next chapter, the next rise, the next reckoning. The story does not end here. Aurelia's journey is only beginning. The shadows of the Empire tremble, and the echoes of silver flame promise a future where destiny is neither denied nor silenced. Every step she takes into the darkness is a step toward the legends that will be told long after the ruins crumble, long after the Empire forgets its arrogance, and long after anyone dared believe a flameborn exile could rise. And so, the silver flame dims just enough to let the listener exhale, just enough to whisper that there is more to come, more fire to burn, more power to awaken, and more stories to claim. The question lingers in the mind like smoke in still air. Would you have chosen her, or feared her too? Am I your savior, or a girl cursed with too much fire? The corridors swallow her silhouette, the ruins echo her final, lingering light, and the listener is left suspended in awe, in longing, in anticipation, the embers of the story ignited and refusing to fade. Aurelia emerged from the shadowed corridors of the ruined arena into the chill night beyond the Empire's walls. The world around her seemed to hold its breath. The wind, which had whipped fiercely during her ascent into power, now stilled completely, leaving an eerie silence that pressed against her ears, against her chest, against the very pulse of her being. The ruins behind her lay cloaked in darkness, half drowned in the silver glow that lingered faintly across her fur, remnants of the fire she had wielded. The torches along the perimeter flickered violently, sputtering, then extinguishing one by one. Shadows stretched unnaturally across the stone and dirt, curling and twisting like living things, leaving Aurelia bathed only in the dim reflection of her own silver flame. Her eyes narrowed against the darkness, wolf instincts humming beneath her skin. Every sense sharpened, every hair along her spine standing on edge. She had faced betrayals, armies, Shadowbeasts, and prophecy itself, but the stillness now carried a weight unlike any she had known. Then it came, the voice. Low, resonant, smooth yet edged with unshakable authority. It did not demand. It did not shout. It whispered, yet it carried over the ruins and across the empty expanse, wrapping around her very soul. She is not the only one. The word struck her with a shiver that ran through bone and fur alike. The air thickened, heavy with anticipation, with something primal, something older than empires, older than silver flame, older than the human constructs of law and hierarchy. Aurelia froze, every muscle coiled, her wolf sensing the presence of something vast, potent, inevitable. She was no longer the hunted, the rejected, the exile, but neither was she the last. A subtle shimmer flickered at the edge of her vision. The ground before her stirred, faint at first, a ripple of air like heat over stone, a pulse she could feel in her chest as if the heartbeat of the earth itself matched hers. Then, a second symbol ignited in the air. Brilliant gold this time, etched like runes suspended mid-motion. It burned not with the silver flame of her own lineage, but with a fire of different intent, different energy, yet equally potent, equally undeniable. A figure emerged from that golden symbol, shadowed but unmistakably Lupin. A wolf, taller and more massive than any ordinary beast, stepped forward with deliberate grace. Its fur seemed woven from night itself, yet its eyes blazed gold, fierce and intelligent, ancient and predatory. There was an aura about it, a command of presence that Aurelia recognized immediately, not as a threat, not yet, but as a force to be reckoned with. The air between them pulsed with anticipation, tension, a promise of confrontation and destiny that could not yet be named. Aurelia's silver flame flickered reflexively, her claws flexing in response, her pulse quickening. She felt it. The echo of the prophecy that had been her cage in her liberation, and she knew instinctively that it was not over. The world had another chosen. Another destiny was awakening. Another fire would rise, and with it, another storm, another war, another test that would challenge everything she had become. Cassian stepped lightly to her side, silent yet vigilant, his presence a grounding tether even as he, too, sensed the magnitude of what had appeared before them. He did not speak. Words would have been pointless, inadequate. Instead, he shifted slightly, protective yet respectful, acknowledging that Aurelia was no longer simply the Flameborn. She was the sentinel, the reckoning, and now a witness to the rise of another sovereign force, another wolf marked by fate as she had been. The golden-eyed wolf studied Aurelia, tilting its head as if measuring, assessing, weighing her strength, her spirit, her claim on the destiny that had been hers alone for so long. Its gaze held intelligence, awareness, and a glimmer of recognition, as if it knew of her, had watched, had waited, had been drawn by the same forces that had molded her from exile into legend. Behind the golden gaze, a faint ripple of energy pulsed, intertwining with the silver embers still clinging to Aurelia's form. The air itself vibrated with the resonance of two chosen wolves, two inheritors of prophecy, two flames destined to converge or collide. Aurelia felt the weight of potential conflict, of alliance, of discovery, and a shiver ran through her, part fear, part thrill, part undeniable exhilaration. The silence stretched, broken only by the distant wind stirring again, faint but insistent, carrying with it the smell of ash, stone, and the wild scent of destiny. Aurelia's wolf instincts whispered to her, growls low in her chest, muscles coiled, ears twitching. She knew that this was not a moment for hesitation, but for perception, for awareness, for preparation. The golden wolf was a herald of what was to come, and whether friend or foe, the balance of the empire, of prophecy, and of the Flameborn's place in the world was about to be tested again. She shifted slightly, the silver flames along her fur sparking to life as her power responded instinctively to the presence of another. Not aggression, not yet. But a subtle assertion, a warning, a signal that the Flameborn was aware, that she would not be diminished, that she had claimed her place and would defend it against anything, anyone, destiny itself if necessary. The golden wolf stepped closer, movements precise, measured, deliberate. Aurelia's heartbeat synced with the rhythm of its approach, a slow, inevitable cadence that hummed through the ground beneath them, the ruins around them, the very air that carried the scent of fire, blood, and prophecy. She raised her head slightly, eyes glowing, silver flame flickering in response to the golden fire that now burned in those ancient, sovereign eyes. Cassian shifted again, stepping forward to flank her, his hand lightly brushing the small of her back. Not to restrain, not to command, but to support, to remind her that though she stood on the edge of the next storm alone in power, she was not alone in presence, in loyalty, in shared understanding. Then, as if drawn by instinct, Aurelia extended a single thought, a silent challenge carried on the pulse of her wolf, a pulse that the golden-eyed figure could sense and interpret. I have risen. I have claimed what was stolen. I am not afraid. Who are you, to step into my path. The golden wolf's eyes narrowed slightly, a flicker of gold light swirling with shadow, as though considering the weight of her presence, the intensity of her power, the inevitability of her destiny. And in that brief exchange, wordless yet laden with meaning, Aurelia knew the truth: this was only the beginning. Another fire had awakened, another chosen had emerged, and the war for the Empire, for prophecy, for survival, was far from over. The ruins seemed to lean inward, shadows stretching, stone groaning under the memory of centuries. Aurelia's silver flame pulsed, responding to the weight of the prophecy yet to be fulfilled. Cassian's eyes remained on the golden wolf, wary, awed, and ready, while Aurelia's stance radiated confidence, power, and the unyielding command of someone who had faced death, betrayal, and exile, and had risen above them all. A wind whispered through the gaps in the arena walls, carrying the faint echo of ancient prophecy, a vibration that Aurelia and the golden wolf both felt deep within their chests. The chosen are awakening, it seemed to say. The reckoning approaches. The flames of fate will collide. Aurelia's gaze held the golden wolf steadily, a silent promise flowing through the connection: she would not falter. She would not submit. And she would not allow history to repeat itself. Not for her, not for those who came before, not for those who would come after. The golden wolf lowered its head slightly, acknowledgement, respect, or perhaps calculation, Aurelia could not yet tell. But the tension between them was electric, a storm waiting to be unleashed, a collision inevitable yet undefined. Aurelia exhaled, silver flame dimming just enough to allow her to step fully into the shadowed night, into the expanse beyond the ruins, into the uncertainty that awaited beyond the Empire's edge. And as she walked, the wind rose again, carrying with it the scent of ash, of smoke, of magic, of destiny. The torches flickered faintly in response, the shadows danced in tribute, and the golden-eyed wolf followed, a presence both haunting and magnetic, promising conflict, alliance, revelation, and war yet to come. Aurelia did not speak. She did not need to. The world had already heard her story, had already witnessed her rise. Now, the silence, the tension, the power, and the prophecy were enough. The first chapter had closed, the next had begun, and the listener, the observer, the witness was left with a single, lingering certainty. This is not over. The night waited. The ruins waited. The Empire trembled. And the flames, silver, golden, untamed, were only just beginning to blaze.